Hi, my name is Leslie Holden, and I'm a co-founder at the Digital Fashion Group, and it's our pleasure today to host this virtual panel discussion as an official launch event for the book Digital Fashion Theory, Practice, Implications, which brings together academics and practitioners from around the world to think through different aspects of digital fashion. The first section on theory provides a foundation from the history of fashion and technology, philosophical questions about reality and aesthetics, and recent contributions from neuroaesthetics. The second section explores different practices surrounding digital fashion. This includes a case study about the Barbie and Balmain collection, sneaker culture, pedagogical applications, and how digital fashion will impact the fashion industry. The third section addresses some claims that digital fashion can solve particular problems in the fashion industry. These chapters examine finance, waste, overproduction, social sustainability, and decolonization. Spread throughout the book are 4 interviews with Julie Zerbo, fashion law, Idea Giolet, digital fashion designer, Jonathan Square, historian, and Matthew Drinkwater, Head of Innovation Agency at London College of Fashion, University of the Arts, London. And it's my pleasure to introduce our panel, Sara, Michael, and Doris. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, I'm Doris Domoszlai-Lantner, and I'm a fashion historian, archivist, and educator. I've worked industry side in fashion archives that were both private and commercial, and working very much materially with objects of fashion. And on the academic side, I'm an adjunct instructor of fashion history at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and also of fashion history and fashion studies at Massachusetts College of Art and Design. I'm bringing a hybrid experience to my understanding and practice of digital fashion.
Hi, I'm Michael Spicher. I'm a public philosopher, which means I speak to bring philosophy to industry into public audiences, specifically in the beauty industry, fashion, mostly digital fashion, of course, architecture, and business more broadly. So I work as a writer, speaker, and consultant, and an educator. I teach courses in the history of aesthetics and existentialism and modern and contemporary art at both Massachusetts College of Art and Design and Boston Architectural College. And currently working on a second book called Is Your Business Beautiful, where I apply ideas of aesthetics into the business world.
I'm Sara Emilia Bernat. I am a trained sociologist. I have a PhD in luxury studies, but I'm working mostly as a brand strategist based out of Paris. I'm currently working for an innovation and growth strategy company called JAMEC. We are using social sciences to unlock different kind of business challenges. And in this setting, I'm building a luxury practice with companies that are at the intersection of luxury, jewelry, fashion. And aside from my consulting, I also do a number of writing for publications like the Luxury Journal or Luxury Daily or Vestoy. But mostly I'm a consultant.
First question, let's get right in there. How do you define digital fashion in this book?
We deliberately didn't offer something like the definition of digital fashion. We kept the definition fairly open so that it would encompass a lot of different facets and also leave it open for future things that we haven't even conceived of yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because when you're talking about digital fashion, it has so many different aspects. Digital fashion could be something that you wear during video games, but it could also mean something that is prototype online or something that has a digital component. Basically anything that has some kind of a digital component and also fashion component can be defined as digital fashion. And as Michael was saying, that it is in such an infancy still, even though digital fashion had been around, as Doris knows the best, as a historian, for the longest time, one way or another, still don't know what is the capacity of it.
Mhm.
So giving a definition right off the hook would be super limiting.
Yeah, and Doris, as a historian, what's your definition?
I do think that the way that we approached this topic, and as Michael and Sarah have mentioned, that we're not necessarily providing full-on definitions, but we are providing a framework for understanding what digital fashion means. And part of that framework includes different types of wearing. So what it means to wear digital fashion. Are you wearing it in a way that could be called assembled or applied when you have a dress that's maybe positioned onto an existing image? Are you wearing it simultaneously, like a filter just being applied while you're moving in real life? Or are you wearing it completely immersed in a digital world? And so those are some types of wear, but we also want to remember where digital fashion touches upon different parts of the industry throughout the production process, from design, sampling, and also throughout the part where it's being sold and distributed to the consumer. So it's a broad topic, and it's still in very nascent phases of understanding.
Yeah. And I would just add real quick that we allowed the authors of each of the chapters to kind of interpret digital fashion in a way that they wanted to interpret. Like, we didn't impose any particular understanding onto them either. So there's some different and competing, I don't know if there's any contradictory definitions, but there's definitely some different emphases.
Doris, how can we position or understand digital fashion in the broader history of dress or fashion?
Yeah, so when someone says the word digital, we often think of and automatically assume modern 20th century era, especially, the golden age of computers. But we can also trace back some of the roots of digital fashion to something like the loom. And so if we look back at right around the turn of the 18th century, we see how early looms at that time, especially the Jacquard loom, integrated these punch cards, which really became integral to modern computers. And so this digitality, however we're defining it, has gone back several centuries in a way. And we can really look into what the various different definitions of digital fashion are in the 20th century, when we're getting into CAD CAM programs and getting into what it means for people to be interacting with fashion online on digital fronts. But it's a much broader understanding and much broader definition than I think most people would assume.
And Michael, since you have a background in philosophy and you're not directly in fashion, what was it that inspired you to work on a book about digital fashion in the first place?
I think a couple things. The first thing is that philosophers have always been interested in the nature of reality, going all the way back to Plato and ancient Greece. Understanding of reality has changed as we had inventions like the microscope and telescope, and now we have a whole realm of cyberspace to consider how these objects, what is the reality of these objects. But there was a specific case that got me really interested in digital objects and then digital fashion more specifically. And that is the Supreme Court of the Netherlands ruled on a case where two older teenage boys, they physically assaulted and threatened further a younger boy until he logged into the video game RuneScape and his character drops 2 items. And then one of the older boys logs in and picks up those items. Well, no one would doubt that, okay, these boys physically hurt this younger boy. But what the Supreme Court of the Netherlands ruled was that a robbery had taken place, so that stealing these digital objects or assets was no different than stealing someone's wallet. And so I think, to me, that was really fascinating. These two philosophers analyzed this case, comparing the philosophy of realism and irrealism, And in my chapter, I kind of push the idea that maybe while we're still in kind of early phase in the grand scheme of human history, we're still in an early phase of computers in some sense, So why not appeal to something like phenomenology that analyzes our intentions and experience of these things, even though we may not know or have a good grasp of the actual nature of them. So that's kind of what got me interested in the notion of digital fashion and objects in the first place.
Sara or Doris, do you want to come in on that question as well?
It's very difficult for industry people to find a depository where you can have access to all kinds of frameworks, understanding where is this coming from, what are the main insights that are guiding digital fashion, what are the practical applications, essentially what are those norms that digital fashion can challenge and brands can tap into. And that really is only possible if we have medium or media that embraces different kind of discipline. So for me, what was very interesting is there is this huge, entirely new phenomenon, and why not approach it from a truly interdisciplinary perspective? Why not combine technology, sociology, business, sustainability? Because in the end of the day, what we want to achieve is one, understanding what is going on here. Why does it matter? How can we apply those insights to set new standards, to tap into ethics beyond just coming up with new exciting ideas or ideas that can set up brands for the next era.
Doris, is there anything you would like to add or build on to that?
Well, I'm coming from definitely a very strong fashion background in the sense that I've worked in fashion academia as well as industry. And so I kind of see the impact of some of this digital fashion touching down right now. I'm currently consulting in an archive where we're working on an AI project, and that's really integrating, what it means to have digital design. And it's happening real time right in front of my eyes. I think we're going to see more and more of that happening, and a book like this is a great resource. Like Sara said, it's hard to find resources that really find that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach. And this is the kind of resource that would then be helpful for projects like this, which are so very new to world.
And actually, just building on that point, I think it's really, really interesting that Doris is talking about this idea of building archives, because what we are usually hearing about digital fashion is skins in video games, or to what if we would be using all these filters instead of our real clothes. But in reality, there are so many other areas that may seem a little bit less sexy, but at the same time, they are incredibly revolutionary when we actually want to change the fashion system. I think there are two things. One is it's just a lovely idea to have truly interdisciplinary collection of essays, frameworks, insights, speculations. And on the other hand, or in addition to that, I think there is a really desperate need to shift away from ideas that are sexy, that are loud, that are timely now, and see what we can actually tap into on the long term to reassess what may not be working really well in the fashion system now, and oftentimes don't get enough space in discourse.
Yeah.
And I think some of these topics that we have covered in the book are giving a great possibility to do that, to expand that discourse. And
this book,
we should, if we were really good at self-promotion, we would hold up a copy.
I expected t-shirts.
No, we would have that in the background. We would be wearing it. Yeah.
I was actually having a conversation with someone today quite a senior person in a very well-known, very important global company who said, yeah, but digital fashion, well, kind of, there's a lack of interest in it now. And I went, really? Okay, that's not so good. But I thought that was an interesting comment. If the kind of focus had shifted in a way, I mean, we know it's shifted a lot since last year. It's shifting. AI is taking up so much bandwidth just now. Has that kind of covered over what we were developing with digital? So, I mean, it's, I think this is just building on what you're saying just now in a way about,
No, and I do not want to hog the space, but just like one more thing to that idea. I think many people actually do feel that way, that digital fashion is not so relevant. And part of the issue, and many of our contributors are talking to that, is this idea that we have very specific ideas on what digital fashion could be, but we are just technically not fully there. So the idea to promote what we could be wearing on screen feels a little bit gimmicky because we just cannot deliver on it yet perfectly.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on that, I think if more people would know that this new system could actually revolutionize all those things that are lacking in the fashion industry now on the back end, there would be an entirely different discourse that we would be having now.
And not just that, but I think people don't realize how much digital is in the broader fashion industry. It's literally touching on every point. And once you realize where the software, where the entertainment, where the identity formation, where all of that lies digitally, you can really get a full understanding of how important the digital aspect of fashion is now.
Building on from what you've just said there, what would you say is one surprising kind of moment in the history of digital fashion that we've had at the moment? Is it perhaps that recently there's been a dip in the interest, but we know that it will continue building? Is that something historically that we can compare to other technology, or is there any kind of equivalent you think of?
Actually, Michael and I were just talking about something the other day where Michael mentioned he was looking into digital cameras from a philosophical perspective. And Kodak, and this is, per our discussion, Kodak had invented this digital camera early on, and they didn't know what to do with it. They kind of let it slide by the wayside, and then were slow to then further market it and use it. And then other companies and the public realized how amazing a digital camera is, and all of a sudden Kodak was behind. So, this could be one of those examples where digital fashion really, in the sense that people tend to think of it right now, as in like putting filters and in video games. That kind of digital fashion really hit it high during the pandemic because people just had a different lifestyle at that time. And so it became a very well-known, popular term, right? And then we hit that slope because we had, again, a change in lifestyle. People are going back to work. And so it might be that there's a little bit of a change in how we're understanding it in people's daily lives, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be important in the future. It's just we need to understand how things are going to be integrated.
And I guess there's lots of different aspects we're talking about here, isn't there? I mean, the digitalization of fashion and the supply chain and the processes and e-commerce and all that kind of thing is very different than the use of 3D virtual prototyping, for example. So we're talking about many, many different softwares and many, many different applications across the way. So,
and even if AI takes over on this, even if I put a picture of myself and program some AI to put me in a different garment, that's still digital fashion in some sense.
Yes, it is. And but that kind of brings me to the next question, Michael. What's the point of digital fashion? And how do you see it moving in the future?
So when I imagine we have all had this experience at some point where we mentioned to somebody who is completely unaware of digital fashion, they wonder what is the point of that? Because digital fashion, at least in its sense of purely digital, can't protect us from the rain, the cold, or the sun, or anything like that. So in my chapter, I talk about how the main purpose, without these quote unquote functional ideas, because you might run out of the house if it's raining, you might grab an ugly raincoat, and you're probably not going to change the oil in your car wearing a tuxedo. But digital fashion, your avatar could do. I mean, I don't know if you're going to change oil in a car in any virtual world, but theoretically you could do that. And it wouldn't matter because you don't have to worry about oil ruining your garment. So I see the main points of digital fashion as aesthetics and meaning making. So moving into the future, we have a drive for aesthetics, and I think one of the sort of drawbacks of some of the digital fashion I've seen is it all has this sci-fi aesthetic, and there's something interesting about that because things we can't do in the real world, like shoes that are on fire or garments that actually have tentacles that move and things like that. There are some interesting things that you can do, but I think people often struggle with connecting it to the real world, and that's why some people have an adverse reaction to it because they don't see how it. I'm not into sci-fi, so I guess I'm not into that. But I think one of the ways that moving into the future, and one of the points of it, is helping people craft their own, physical identity. Because at the end of the day, things like digital fashion and other digital things are a tool to help us live better in the real world, I think. And when you try to craft your own identity, we're limited by money and space. You only have so much room in your closet. You can't have an infinite amount of clothing to just try out. And it's also very wasteful to just try out different identities, different outfits. But you could do that in a digital space with the freedom of not having the same level of public ridicule. I mean, I know that there are still things that happen in digital spaces as far as bullying and such. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but there are spaces you can go where you could experiment with what you want to be. And hopefully that can help you in the physical world without the added expense and spatial issues and the social pressures. So I do think that digital fashion provides a unique way. And then things that we've kind of alluded to, there's a statistic, it might have changed since we had heard this a couple of years ago, but that Gen Z buys a garment and wears it 7 times before discarding it. By making it a digital garment from the beginning, it cuts a lot of waste out of it and still supports people. So I do think aesthetics, identity, and some of these other issues could be alleviated. So I think it's a way to change how we think about fashion and how we think about ourselves in fashion, in our relationship to fashion.
And why should people buy this book?
It is as far as we understand it is the first academic book on digital fashion.
Sure, right. Wow.
That's as far as I can tell. I mean, there are other books on how to or how to market using digital fashion. I've seen some things like that, but I think this is the first academic book. But even despite the name academic book, we have a mixture of people from academic to industry writing, and then our interviews with a fashion lawyer on what digital fashion means for law, and so I think there's a wide enough array of topics and perspectives that it should be meaningful. At least something should be meaningful to most people that are interested in fashion or digital fashion, broadly construed.
And coming back to Doris just now, because as the historian in the room, how do you see the future of digital fashion?
So that's an interesting question. I don't seem to speculate future scenarios, but because I'm also so much in the industry side, I think There's going to be more and more emphasis on digital applications in and throughout the fashion industry and the fashion system and the processes that are taking place. Because in no ways CAD/CAM technologies, sampling, virtual try-on, they really are making parts of the industry more efficient, less wasteful, more sustainable. And overall, we see that sustainability reaches both the social and an environmental aspects. People are going to be developing, additional technologies that build on what we have now. There are some lags because people are demanding more in a way, and some of those apps are not delivering what they want. And so we're going to see tech trying to get to the point where they can deliver more, and they will be because we see that they're doing that.
And that's a very good segue to the next question for Sarah. In what ways can digital fashion brands build meaningful connections with consumers in a digital space? What ways are they doing it?
Yeah, I think one aspect of the book that I personally really appreciate that we never dissect digital fashion in the bubble. It lives in every single chapter in different contexts. And I think when we are approaching digital fashion from the meaning making, from the community making perspective, we do have to understand the larger zeitgeist and all of its issues and challenges in order to create solutions. So we do use the term community and community making all the time, but it usually refers to this idea that we need to get as many people as possible worshipping the same idea without actually providing mutual value to them. So digital fashion is a great lens or a great medium to understand what do these people want and how can we serve them. When we are talking about sustainability, for example, how can we tap into, for example, crowdsourcing? How can we tap into interactive feedback? How can we create spaces where people actually like to spend time in and they're able to give criticism, they're able to leave food track that marketers can understand, pick up on, and adjust the supply chain accordingly. So rather than walking away with a very tactical approach, just understanding the bigger picture and how digital fashion can fit into it. And that I think that is really key to these kind of like long-term connections that are deeply providing value.
And I kind of asked you the concluding question earlier in a way. Who's going to read the book? So I want to shift that question a little bit to be more about what kind of impact do you want this book to have, / what is success for you with this book? What will success be for you? You say it's the first, in your knowledge, academic book about digital fashion, which I can believe because it takes a long time to produce a book, and digital fashion hasn't been around in this way for for very long. So, yeah, what kind of impact would you like the book to have?
For me, I hope it's a conversation starter. That's why we wanted to leave things. We wanted to have as many disciplines as possible. I think the authors represent 4 continents. We don't try and get a strict definition. I'm hoping it's something that people refer to and use as a way, even if it's to critique the way we framed it. Yeah, I hope it's a conversation starter that people bring into industry, the classroom, and other conversations.
Doris?
I think part of my understanding of success for this book would be seeing it and having it available for lots of different audiences. So in libraries, but also in bookstores. And so just seeing it reach not just the academics, but also industry professionals and students and just everyday people who are interested in what kind of an impact it has on their lives.
Sara?
I mean, I think Michael and Doris covered it most, but like I think for me, two more areas like or push is one, really understand what digital fashion is and what could be.
Yeah.
Because we have such a fragmented understanding most of the time. And then two, back to Doris's point, to have as many types of audiences as possible. Usually when you have a publication, you have one type of person, you have one type of language, and we wanted to include many different kind of languages. So for example, there was one contributor who expressed that she was very nervous about having a more kind of like cooler, casual style. How will it match up with some of the academics? And we were just pushing her to go for it because she is more on the industry side. She shouldn't act like someone, write like someone who she isn't and who her crowd isn't. So that means that we will have a mix of different kind of ideas, a mix of different kind of experiences. And I think that would provide, on the one hand, a more holistic view, but also people can actually pick what they're interested in and what not.